All right, I'm going to try an experiment here. I thought I'd give a little background presentation about Mount Vernon Citizen, this .org and this Facebook group, why and how, and then this newer project I have, this My Candidate Scorecard, the why and how of that. So let's give a little timeline. February 2012, we moved here to Mount Vernon, and we live quietly. A lot of work in the yard, a lot of gardening. We have pets. We interact with our neighbors, but like most people, we just live a quiet life here. And that's that. Regarding Facebook, I'm on Facebook personally, but like a lot of people, my personal Facebook was populated with my family and like my high school friends. That's kind of what it was. It was sort of this, cool way to keep in touch with people from the past. Since my past was elsewhere, I grew up on Long Island. I didn't have any contact with Mount Vernon people on Facebook. Even with my neighbors, we weren't like, "Hey, are you on Facebook?" We didn't do that. We were neighbors, so we talked to one another face to face. So that's kind of, so I had no contact with anything having to do with Mount Vernon. So I wasn't in touch with that. I would read things in the paper about the city, casually. Then in 2017, so fast forward from 2012 when we moved into 2017, I learned about this site next door. And so I joined, and we live in Fleetwood. So it was part of the little Fleetwood group. But I didn't really do much with it. I would, look up there, but I didn't do much with it. I mean, this was all pre-COVID. So I was mostly just out doing stuff, working and living and things like that. So 2012 to February 2019, nothing really happening. Then in May of 2019, my wife sends me a Facebook post that said that the Mount Vernon Animal Shelter's bills were not getting paid. And as a result of that, animals at the shelter were not getting the veterinary care that they needed, including some of the pre-adoption wellness checks that they needed to get out the door to new homes, their forever homes. That motivated me to act. And so I called the controller, who at the time was Debbie Reynolds. She yelled at me and she hung up on me. This kind of stunned me. I didn't understand. I was confused, certainly pissed off, but mostly just curious about what in the world, how is this possible? And what does this mean that if this is the controller for the city and she would do that, got me curious. Regarding the animal shelter, I started a petition on Nextdoor, right? And I put the letter out. I said I was going to send a letter to the city. Does anyone want to join me? And some people did. I don't remember how many people. I could go back and look, maybe 20 signed on. Delia Farquharson and Andre Wallace stepped up. They were responsive. In fact, after I hung up the phone with Debbie Reynolds, the first thing I did was call Delia Farquharson. I never had contact with anybody in the city, no council members or anything like that. We voted, but it was, I wasn't thinking about things the way I am now, for sure. She was great when I called her. She understood, and she followed up, as did Andre Wallace. They both tried their best. They stepped up, but at that time, the city was gripped in horrific dysfunction. And we were going into the summer of multiple mayors. And then Rich Thomas had to resign, and Procari was indicted, and then he was he was found guilty with that water department money fiasco. So things were just ratcheting up. And at that time, I was just starting to become more aware of it, all because of this Facebook post really about the animal shelter. I guess had that not happened, I still would have become more aware of things, just because I do look at the paper, and things were in the paper a lot more about the city, but I wouldn't have started poking around on Facebook probably. So anyway, from May 2019 to February 2021, I do start poking around on Facebook, and I see the different news groups that are devoted to the city of Mount Vernon. I was kind of disappointed in them. Some of it was news, there's a fire on Fifth, stuff like that, and shooting, it was reporting real stuff, but other stuff seemed, I don't know, it seemed like it was trying to be the New York Post of Mount Vernon, just kind of sensational and salacious, which is, that's a model, that is a business model that works, is, you kind of gin up controversy, stuff like that. That's a way to get people to attend to things. Sadly, that's something that works. But anyway, I start reading more. I start posting about once a month, once COVID hit and we socialized less, we were home more, eyeballs on screens more, eyeballs on Facebook more. I'm aware of this stuff in the city. So I start looking and I start posting stuff more relevant to the city. So not a lot, but certainly more. I'm thinking about it. Then February 2021 comes around and there was a snowstorm. And during that snowstorm, I had a little time. So at the same time, the city of Mount Vernon's budget was late. I pulled it up, I put it in Excel, started playing around with it, reorganizing it, ran a few simple formulas on it, and decided, let me share this with the neighbors. But how? I didn't know how. How was I going to get that information out there? I don't know anybody on Facebook. Remember, the people, while I was looking at news groups, maybe once in a while I posted stuff, I didn't really know anybody in the city except for my neighbors. So I didn't really have a means to do it. So mid-February 2021, I decided, all right, well, let me get a .org, because I figured, all right, I can get a .org. I know it's not difficult to get a domain. And so I figured, all right, let me get, what can I get? And then I figured MountVernonCitizen.org. And I got the Facebook group, Mount Vernon Citizen, the Facebook group. Although, remember, I didn't know anybody, so wasn't quite sure, but I figured, all right, let me get that anyway. And then I posted the budget files. There were quite a few. I started, like the top 10 expenses, the top 10 revenue streams. I put, a little bit of narrative up there, kind of like what I was all about, just a little bit. So I posted that. And then I figured, okay, the way I'll signal that these files are here is I had a little bit of a presence on Nextdoor. So I said, hey, I started this .org and I just posted these budget files there. Check it out. The Facebook group really was not a group. It was me and my wife and my neighbor. But again, like me, they're from the Bronx. They moved here and they don't know anybody. They knew fewer people than I did from Mount Vernon. They knew nothing at all. So anyway, we were the group, but it was enough, I guess, by putting it out there. I think probably on Nextdoor, I said, oh yeah, I've got a Facebook group too. And a couple of people, I guess, stumbled into it and then just sort of organically grown a little bit at a time, right? So it started with a few people, and now I think, I don't remember, there's somewhere around 150 people. Although it's a public group, so no one really has to be a member. Anyone can stumble in and poke around and look at it. So that's how I ended up getting MountVernonCitizen.org in the Facebook group. So now, spring of 2021, there's city council and controller elections here in the city. I've got this .org up. And anyone who's gone to MountVernonCitizen.org can see it's totally bare bones. It's all I do is I just create PDF files on my computer, upload them to the blog. That's it. Anyway, we get to spring of 2021 and we have these elections. I decide on a lark, really. I mean, I think it was because I had been reading more, the whole thing with the three mayors and just the chaos in the city. I became real concerned about it. And so I knew during the petitioning stage, I'm like, you know what, if anyone wants me to sign the petition, the only way I'll consider doing is if they sign this ethics pledge that I have. And I put some points together, a single page ethics pledge. And I posted that. I put that up on both. I think I put it both on the Facebook group, the .org, and on Nextdoor. I threw it out there. Some people saw it And let me back up here. Some people saw that, and that resulted in me having contact with first Nicole Lucio was the first person who I had contact with, and we had a great talk about one element on the ethics pledge, and that got me thinking. We disagreed about a component. It had to do with when under what conditions you would file a FOIL request for information from the city. But from there, I just sort of organically developed this decision making framework that was kind of sort of a quantitative way for me to fix my thinking about the different candidates. It was a rating scale, a series of rating scales. I posted my ratings of candidates, and I gave my rationale for why I gave those ratings. Really what it was I was putting out there, I was modeling my approach, right? That's what I was doing, is showing people this is how I am coming to these decisions. I figured if I'm going to create this framework and I'm going to put ratings out there, I better put justifications for my ratings. And so I did. So I put the work in, and from there also I rated the candidate. There were a few forums where the candidates were asked questions. I rated the candidates' responses in those forums, and I layered those additional ratings into my framework. And as part of the research, I just started looking around more. I started looking at the documents in the different city cost centers at the Urban Renewal Agency, the Industrial Development Agency, Board of Water Supply, and then the Mount Vernon Public Library. And of those, they were all kind of, I was like surprised at what I was seeing in looking there, really alarmed. And I understand now more about, the effect that Deborah Reynolds had on the fiscal operation of the city. Mount Vernon Public Library, though, was stood apart. And there, I started writing and putting documents that I wrote up on the Mount Vernon Citizen.org and then the Facebook group. And still Nextdoor, I was still doing that, although now I'm not really doing Nextdoor anymore. Anyway, so in the summer of 2021, I started contemplating the decision-making framework that I had used to rate and rank candidates. And so I had some meetings with, trusted friends and family members and a few other people who I got put in contact through those connections to just kind of vet the idea. Can I develop this into something that's useful for more than just me? Does it have a wider application? If so, how? And so I started asking people to tell me why the idea sucked, and it was dead, and it was of no utility at all. And I didn't find that. I found, people were like, they were interested. They were like, it's an interesting idea. Who knows if it can be anything more than an interesting idea. But I was bolstered enough that I decided to pursue trying to build this decision-making framework into something more substantial and potentially useful for people other than myself, other than the Excel file that I used to do this stuff in the spring, in the primaries in 2021. So I decided to pursue it using what I know of as an iterative process, or one of my friends said in the website development or software development realm, it's called MVP, the minimum viable product process, which essentially means you go slow, you build just what you need to, you get feedback from users, and then you redevelop, you make changes. And you constantly do that. You constantly come up with new iterations. So I decided that I was going to pursue this process. So to do it, I secured this mycandidatescorecard.org. Who knows if that's a good name? I don't know. People were like, maybe it should be yourcandidatescorecard.org. So I'm like, I don't know, maybe it should be. Maybe it should just be candidates. Maybe it should be the candidate. I don't know. It's a name. That's the one I settled on. I don't know that it's a great name. I don't know that it's a terrible name. It's descriptive. It was available, so I got it. So I secured that domain, filed for trademark protection. And then in the fall of 2021, I hired a developer to build the website. And then in the spring of 2022, just this spring, I launched the first iteration during the New York State primaries. Is that right? Primaries? Yeah. and the school board trustee elections that we just had. So I launched it, getting feedback, good feedback. I made a few changes. It's challenging. I knew going in that, to the extent I'm looking to change voter behavior, it is a 10 out of 10, 100 out of 10 on the scale of difficulty, right? That's a big challenge, but that's okay. I knew that would be a challenge. So the next iteration of the mycandidatescorecard.org idea will be in the fall of 2022 general elections. The other thing I'm planning to do is I'll be working with a school district this fall in New Jersey. I'd love to work with Mount Vernon schools. And the idea is to get high school students doing some research on candidates, get high school students to use this tool for their internal student government elections. Maybe I'll approach Mount Vernon schools this fall or maybe next spring. I don't know. At some point I will. I've got a commitment to a school district in New Jersey. So I've been asked who pays for this. Who pays for this work? Who paid for the development of the website, and the answer is no one. I do, me. And why do I do it? For two reasons. Number one, I don't know. I'm curious. I'm an experimentalist in the pragmatic, practical, sort of scientific method, John Dewey sense of the word experimentalist. Educators talk about being, in quotes, a lifelong learner. I guess that's what I am. I like to learn things. I frame it as I'm on a quest to reduce my own ignorance. That's the way I treat endeavors, is I want to become less ignorant about things in the world. So that's the first reason. The second reason is to be useful. I've been on a quest to be more useful. There comes a time, I think, in everyone's life where you want to be more useful to those around you. And so that's the second reason why. So, there is some cost here, and, thankfully my wife is wonderfully tolerant of me redirecting some of money into the development of this project, the My Candidate Scorecard project. The Facebook stuff and the Mount Vernon Citizen.org is a minimal financial cost. Certainly it takes time to do this kind of work, but in the big scheme of things, this is relatively easy to do. And if it's useful to somebody, if the information is helpful to somebody, then it's worth it. And so I hope so. So anyway, that's how we got here. I'll put this out there like I do with other stuff, and if it's useful, maybe I'll make another one. I've thought about other ones that I want to do. So, all right, be well.